We are so lucky here to have one of the best cardiologists in Spain, Dr. Aldama from the CHUAC, and also a member of the Spanish Society of Cardiology and the Spanish Heart Foundation. Thank you very much for being here today. Thank you very much. I'm not the best, obviously, but it's a great pleasure to be here today to talk about the reasons why fish is a good source of health, and in particular of good heart health. I'm a cardiologist, so what I do is basically try and mitigate the failure of heart prevention. So all of the initiatives that highlight those measures that are useful to help us avoid falling sick, particularly when it comes to heart disease, are welcome. So I would like to start by talking about Juan Ponce de León, who was a governor of Puerto Rico, but he was not famous because of that. He was famous because he discovered La Florida. And so what led the governor of Puerto Rico to leave his position and die in La Florida because of his explorations? What Juan Ponce de León was looking for was the so-called source of eternal youth. And as a result of his search, he explored La Florida. He couldn't find them, unfortunately. Well, not because they didn't exist. We know that the source of eternal youth existed, but they were not in La Florida, and they were not springs, they were not fountains. So this is the evolution of the life expectancy in the last 30 years. The darker a country, the longer the life expectancy. In Spain, our life expectancy has risen considerably. Japan, as we know, is the country with the longest life expectancy. We are the fourth, the third if we exclude Singapore, but we're expected to become the leaders in life expectancy in the future. We live well according to the statistics. This is an index of healthy countries measuring the state of health in the elderly. And we can see that Spain is one of the countries with the best life quality. So why do we have such a good life expectancy? Well, the reason is that our main killer, which is heart disease, has gradually disappeared. The paler a country is, the less mortality because of heart disease it has. In Spain, mortality caused by heart disease has fallen dramatically. We are the OECD country which has the least heart fatality rate. And this is important because OECD countries are wondering, why is Spain so successful in cardiovascular health? Because as we know, cardiovascular disease is the main killer of European people, Western people in general. Well, this is the secret, Mediterranean diet. We know that Mediterranean diet is one of the main sources of cardiovascular good health, and this was proven by a Spanish study. There are many diets out there. However, the only diet which has a solid scientific support, so that we can tell you that if you want to live longer and better, you should adopt the Mediterranean diet. This is the PREDIMED study carried out in Spain, showing that if you follow this diet for 5 years, your cardiovascular fatality will be reduced in 30%. And this was not proven by any other dietary study, only by the Mediterranean diet. So what stands out in the Mediterranean diet is a very high consumption of fish as protein source. Actually, in the US, people are worried about cardiovascular prevention. The US health system understands that cardiovascular disease is going to entail a fourth of the whole health expenditure out there. So therefore, the US states are trying to invest in prevention, and they are trying to promote a good health. Actually, the American Heart Association has studied the Spanish model, and they believe that our diet is one of the keys to success, and namely a diet based on fish as protein source, and they call it the PESCO Mediterranean diet. According to scientists, the pesco Mediterranean diet decreases compared to vegan, milk, egg, vegetarian, and other diets. If we compare the dietary patterns among all those diets, the pesco Mediterranean diet can decrease mortality in 15%, which is not achieved by any other diet. And if we look at death by stroke or ischemic cardiopathy, it diminishes the mortality rate in 35%. So if you want a successful dietary pattern, if you want to live longer and better, you need to adopt the pesco Mediterranean diet. This is scientifically proven and compared to other diets which are more trendy and more popular. And this is not such a good idea to import foreign diets which are not as good as ours. The good and the evil. So the pesco Mediterranean diet works. We know it because the scientists have told us so. But why does it work? Well, in the last 3 decades, we have fought against fats. When we talk about light diets, we talk about fat-poor food. Some fats are bad, but other fats are actually good or even excellent. Why are fats so good? What we call the polyunsaturated fats. Fish is abundant in polyunsaturated fats, what we call the omega-3 fatty acids. So why are omega-3 fatty acids so good? When we take in fatty acids, they are not spent by our bodies as energy source. Our skin, which is the biggest organ that we've got, that we use to relate to others and to the environment, we know that the cell membrane is actually made of fat. And what is the best material, what is the best substrate to create cell membrane? Polyunsaturated fats. Our bodies are using polyunsaturated fats in order to create and repair cell damage. Cells all across our bodies, from our eyes to muscles, to joints, to the immune system, blood, etc. Every single cell has to be repaired and regenerated, and the material used to do that, if it's available, it's actually omega-3, a fatty acid which is the best quality material to repair damage and to create new cells. So when you think about omega-3 fatty acids, you need to understand that your cells require fatty acids to repair themselves and to make new cells. However, if you do not have this premium material, your cells interact with each other through the membranes, which means that the intercell communication will be better if the material used to repair the membrane is of high quality. This is essential for our brains, for the retina, for the heart. The fact that cells can communicate well between each other so that you have a uniform, homogeneous, rhythmic heart contraction, for instance. The fact that in your liver, omega-3 goes to regulate the cholesterol transportation pattern, for instance. There are 2 types of cholesterol, as we all know, but this is not quite true. There is not good and bad cholesterol. There's only one type of cholesterol. What happens is that blood is made of water and fat does not dissolve in water, so you need cholesterol transporters. Cholesterol has to be carried in tracks, and we have LDL, which is like the evil track that carries cholesterol from the liver to the rest of cells. In that transport, plenty is deposited in the arteries, and that could cause an acute myocardial infarction, for instance. But then we have a good track, which is HDL, that just takes a surplus of cholesterol and returns it to the liver, stopping that cholesterol surplus to become sedimented in your arteries, such as the brain and the heart arteries, because if the cholesterol surplus is sedimented in your arteries, it grows, it generates a cholesterol slab that in the end it explodes, it bursts literally. And a blood clot is created. If it happens in your heart, you will suffer from an infarction. If it happens in your brain, you will suffer from a stroke. So what omega-3 fatty acids are doing is to induce HDL tracks that will pick up your cholesterol surplus. So it's not just it's an excellent material to repair cells. It's also true that it generates cholesterol uh, mm, transporters that will take the cholesterol surplus where it is needed. That is why, as explained earlier, it seems that omega-3 fatty acids, that is, eating fish, is good for all. How can it be good for all? Well, it's true, it's good for your heart, it's good for your brain. Clinical trials have proven that neurocognitive functions of children and the elderly will improve if they eat fish. Fish is an antidepressant too. It's also good for your eye, for the retina, for the skin, for joints, for the immune system, for the liver. Why is it good for everything? Why is fish like the uh, one size fits all for our bodies? What happens is that the fatty acids of fish are used to repair the cell membranes of every organ. And this is done with a top quality material, which means that your cells are functioning at top level and your liver is going to generate more tracks that will transport your surplus cholesterol. That is why the range of benefits hidden in fish consumption, especially those which are rich in omega-3 fatty acids, is universal. Now, given that I'm a cardiologist, I'm going to show you some examples, some scientific data about the cardiovascular protection underlying fish consumption. Let me start by acute myocardial infarction. This is what's happening, the Casillas phenomenon. A young guy with low cardiovascular risk. This is a lady, 38 years, who was admitted after acute myocardial infarction. You can see in the image the coronary artery, which has disappeared in the image. This means that one of your arteries is occluded. There are no replacement arteries, as if to say. We also have another problem in our hearts, a bad design, a faulty design that makes it even worse, because when an artery is occluded, the area which is served by that artery, the muscle served by that artery is going to die, and the cells will not be regenerated. That is why we need to open that territory by surgery. Usually we apply a stent, which is a metallic mesh, and we open the artery, we cut it open. And thus we save the patient and we rescue the myocardial cells. However, we are receiving more and more patients with very low cardiovascular risk factor, but who are eating poorly. We know that if we replace 3% of the protein intake from meat with fish, we know that cardiovascular mortality is reduced in 30%. The best thing would be to eat fish twice a week with a decrease in mortality of 20%, and every 5 additional grams, or every 100 additional grams, your mortality rate will decrease in 5%. Now we have a stroke, which is a cerebrovascular stroke in this case. The main reason is usually there is a thrombus which is released and travels across the arteries to the brain, where it causes an occlusion of the brain artery, and eventually there is a rupture in your brain. This is very important, very serious. It is suffered by around 130,000 people in Spain, is a top mortality cause for females and the second for males. So does fish reduce your risk of stroke? It does. And there is evidence for that. Eating fish twice per week decreases the risk of stroke in 45%, provided it is grilled or baked in the oven and it is not fried or battered. So, message. Eating fish is great. It's basic to have a good cardiovascular health, and the cooking mode has an impact because if you fry it, for instance, many of the nutrients are going to be lost. More benefits. We didn't know which dietary pattern we should recommend to stroke patients or to myocardial infarction patients. We know that if you have suffered from that before, you have more chances of eventually dying from that. So the question is, what is the best diet for heart patients? So they carried out a study in the UK analyzing 3 different diets recommended to former infarction patients. First group had fish twice per week. The second group, a fiber-rich diet, and the third group, a so-called light or fat-poor diet with less than 30% of calories coming from fat. So the groups followed the diets for 2 years in the UK. Some of the patients who were included in the fish group, the English people said, we don't want to eat so much fish. Can we have something else instead? And the doctor said, okay, we're going to give you omega-3 fatty acids supplements, tablets, because we believe that, well, maybe this would enhance your omega-3 intake. So those who were recommended a high intake of fiber or a low fat intake didn't have any benefit. And those who took omega-3 supplements orally didn't have any benefits. The only group which had an actual mortality decrease of 30% were the ones who were eating fish twice a week. So you can ask me, why is that so? If you say omega-3 is good, however, with acute myocardial infarction patients, if they take supplements, they don't get any benefits. How come? Well, there are balances in polyunsaturated fatty acids, and fish has the perfect balance between the 2 types of polyunsaturated fatty acids. So when you take an omega-3 supplement, the balance is not the same. Moreover, the opportunity cost. The opportunity cost is the highest cost that a person can pay in their life, which means that if you do something, you cannot do something else at the same time. So if you decide to eat fish for your meal, you're not having anything else. This is an opportunity cost. If you're having a fish fillet, you're not eating a burger, for instance. So what fish is actually doing is replacing other detrimental food types. So myocardial infarction patients had a better survival rate because of this. Sudden death. I could explain to you what sudden death means, but I'm going to show it to you. The definition of sudden death is what happened right here. A healthy person who had absolutely no risk issues just collapsed and actually died on the spot. The thing that kills the most in Spain is sudden death. 35,000 Spanish people die every year from sudden death. But of course, if it happens on a football ground, everybody will see it. But unfortunately, this is happening every single day. In fact, in my area, which is A Coruña, in the city of A Coruña, this means that approximately 220 people die in the area of A Coruña every single year. It's as if an airplane crash every year and we wouldn't do anything about it. So why do people die from sudden death? Over 35 years of age, myocardial infarction is the most frequent cause. If you are over 35 and you die suddenly, it's because of an infarction. And if you're younger than 35, the most probable cause is congenital disease. Cardiovascular diseases are so mortal because usually the first symptom you've got is that you die. That is why they are so dramatic. So you're going to tell me that eating fish decreases sudden death? It does, because sudden death is caused by an electric malfunction. People believe it's because your heart stops, but it's not. When there is a heart arrest, your heart is beating, then there is an infarction, a myocardial infarction. So some areas in the heart stop working. So there is an electric chaos in your heart. So every cell is beating in an unorganized way, and the heart cannot contract. So when there is a heart arrest, people get an electric shock, because that electric shock goes to reset the heart's cells and encourages them to contract harmoniously. So if cells are made of premium materials, they will naturally tend to work harmoniously. So the chance for electric chaos in people with solid cell membranes is much lower. So the probability of suffering from mortal arrhythmia if you have good membranes decreases in 70%, and this will happen if you eat fish at least twice a day. These benefits will only take place if you eat fish naturally and if it's not fried or buttered. So just to sum up, Juan Ponce de Leon was looking for the source of eternal youth. He died without finding them. He discovered Florida, but where were the sources of eternal youth? They were in Spain, and they are called Pesco-Mediterranean diet because it provides premium materials for building each of the cell units of our bodies. It provides numerous cardiovascular benefits. Cardiovascular disease is a main killer in the West. It also provides cardiovascular benefits, so we need to remember to eat fish twice a day, preferably grilled. Omega-3 supplements are no good, and when you cook, try to avoid buttering and deep frying. And just to finish, a classical quote, Cervantes wrote this, one of the most famous writers, Cervantes, said that your health is cooked in the kitchen of your stomach. Thank you.